I'm finally starting my This Is Us video. First of all, I just took a long time to do it because when it comes to these special videos, you know, the ones with the whole dun 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 dun, what you just saw, the intro videos, like where I edit it and everything, I want to make sure that I'm actually going to have time to do it. When I record them, then I just jump right into editing and I go really into tunnel vision. I put the pictures in and all of that, and if I get sucked into a tunnel vision at the wrong time where I'm supposed to be doing work for Heidi with our SPA Sigma stuff, or you know, coaching, or you know, taking care of family business, whatever, then it could be very bad. But right now I'm chilling. I'm actually in Philadelphia, and all of this stuff doesn't really matter. Let's get on to the show. Pretty much what this is going to be is I am starting this series. Hopefully I can keep up with it, where I will be explaining my thought process and reasons as to why I believe certain characters in TV shows and movies are the personality types that they are. I leave this open for us to just, you know, have discussion, and I'm hoping that it'll help us to understand when we are both looking at the color orange, but then somebody's calling it red and somebody else is calling it yellow. Or somebody is saying orange, but then somebody else is calling it yellow, and then it's like, oh, now I see what the pattern is. Like, we're looking at the same thing, but it seems like every time we're seeing this, you think it's this function, when in actuality it's this function. And I'm saying that, you know, y'all can help me refine this, but I feel like until we TI this out in an FE manner, like come together and like bring together like our thought processes and everything, we're not going to actually agree on a lot of things, you know, when it comes to, you know, typing people. So become very helpful even for Dave's superpowers, you know, who's already got his objective personality type stuff going. But yeah, this is just my way of doing it. And today we are doing This Is Us. So let's get started. Okay, so the first character that I'm going to say is Rebecca. Personally believe that she is an ESFJ. She's a great mom and wife despite the mistake that she made, and mistake as in what she did with Randall. She was trying to make sure that Randall did not want somebody else over her, which seems like a very like FE thing, like, oh, but I want you to want me and I want to be the best for you possible. She also seems like very extroverted. At the same time, she does a very good job with trying to create this world for Randall. She's not saying, oh, I'm going to rob you of this great privilege to know your father, while at the same time I'm going to also not provide what you need and want. And if she couldn't do it as well as his father being there, she did her absolute very best to do it in that way. And I think that that's a very, you know, huge sign of a very dedicated FE user, or a great mom in general, but especially for an ESFJ. She doesn't have any signs of NI, but she seems very SI. She loves to sit and reminisce and experience things in detail. Oftentimes you'll just see her like zone out, and she'll just like go all the way back and like start thinking about things and like that's happened in the past, and like it's very ethereal in a way, and it's very detailed. It's you get to see the specific things that she'll bring up. She even likes like certain like traditions and routines, such as the Super Bowl, where she like repeats things to relive those moments. And she speaks very straightforward. That's another thing that, and even in my ESFJ Venn diagram video that I talked about, ESFJs tend to speak very straightforward with their speech. That doesn't mean they never use metaphor, parable, all of that, because they still do have tertiary NE. However, it's less likely, and when they do use it, they don't create like a whole story out of it. It's more of like just a quick thing to throw in there, and then they like move on. While with an ENFJ, they usually have like a whole story or a whole parable, and then you have to figure out what each thing represents. And that's because that's just their natural way of speaking oftentimes. She's very structured. In particular, she forced herself to be strong for her kids and even told Miguel to take a walk if he couldn't be. This was the scene where she had to return back to the house, and she had to tell Miguel that that Jack died. Spoiler alert. She had to alert Miguel that Jack died, and she told him that, hey, I am not in a position right now where I have the opportunity to cry and weep about all this. I have to be strong for my children. And if you can't be strong for them, then you can go handle that somewhere else. But I have to do this. And I see that as like a very FE thing. It could be TE too. I could see that. You know, I like it. So like I could see TE user doing that, but I feel like it would be like for different reasoning. For her, it was more so because she wanted to value the emotional experience of her children, and she knew how her emotions would have influenced and affect the emotions around her, which is a thing that FE DOMs especially are really good at doing, and FE users just in general. She was trying to protect her aura and her emotional influence from infecting her children. So all she really is inferior TI. Like, you can see this very evidently with her. She's all about keeping the peace. She even withholds truth so that she can, you know, allow people to be comfortable. If she sees that there is a fact or truth that may disrupt morale, then until she finds a way to give it in an appropriate time, in the appropriate manner, and all of that, she will just withhold it. And this includes the secret that she withheld from Randall for so many years. She's very focused on, you know, fixing that harmony, but then at the same, so that's FE Dom, but then at the same time, you can tell TI inferior, like, it always comes out in lashing, you know, when under, like, increased, like, stress. With TI inferior, I see it more as, like, a small, I don't know, creature that's like backed into a corner that doesn't know its power until you finally like just keep on beating on it, and then it has no choice but to defend itself, and it just obliterates everything. It's like, oh, I just really, I don't want to say this, I don't want to say this, I don't want to say this. Then when you look at the therapy session where Rebecca finally blew up at Kevin, there's a scene where she literally says, Kevin, I'm just flustered and overwhelmed, and this is not very kind. And then that's when she blows up, and she's like, he was just easier. And that shut down everything. She was trying so hard to keep the peace. Oh, this is not very kind. And she didn't want to hurt his feelings. But Kevin kept on backing that TI into a corner, backing it into a corner, backing it into a corner. And it lashed, and just that shut down the silence. Now you can compare this to TI Tertiary, which we'll get to, but there's a character who has TI Tertiary in this show, according to my opinion, and she's just always readily lashing out. So yeah, we'll see that. Lastly, she's really focused on making good impressions and memories for her loved ones, knowing how it'll influence their lives. Same with her career. I just love watching people dance while I sing. I want to do my small part in that. Everybody thinks like, oh, only intuitives like dream and everything. No, she's an ESFJ who's dreaming to be this great singer and all of that because she wants to create memories and impressions and, you know, just overall like good experiences for those around her, so that because she understands how their experiences, their impressions, the imprints that they'll have in their lives will affect their identities in the future. And she explains this, or she shows this, or demonstrates it very heavily when it comes to her children especially. So next, we're going to talk about Jack. And I know that this is probably going to be controversial, and I'm open to hearing, you know, opposite, you know, or differing opinions, but I believe that Jack is ESTP. Now, the reason why I believe that he's ESTP is, first of all, it's several reasons. If you could see that, probably not. Yep, a lot of reasons. But One of the things that I put right away was the fire scene. If you ever watch that fire scene, the way that he responded so quickly, there's definitely some SE in his stack, and it's pretty high up, and it's strong. Now, whether it's dominant or auxiliary, tertiary, you gotta, think about that. But I'm pretty sure that he was exuding like a lot of SE with that, and especially being from the military, then that really helps a lot too with him being able to know how to act in such situations. His facial expression always looks like ESTP Buzz Lightyear's. Like, he's just always like that. And I know that's probably not something like that's really big to be able to go off of, but that's something that I've noticed. Like, even when you look at characters such as like Tyler Durden, and like just other ESTPs in general, then they usually, TI users in general, they just usually have that like face like this, where it's just like, I don't know, for whatever reason, that's just how it is. And so I think that like that's somewhat helpful in typing him. His TI shows up in detachment. So it shows up in detachment even when warm. Pretty much, he's clearly a very kind and nice person, but I wouldn't say that he's very warm. I believe that there's still some sort of like detachment, some sort of like, he's comfortable with feelings, and he's comfortable with like aiding to people in their feelings. I think that he's just a very, very, very healthily developed ESTP. Like, you don't see ESTPs as healthily developed as he is, and it's almost to the point where some people have mistyped him, in my opinion, mistyped him as an ENFJ. Same functions, but different order. And so I think that he's been channeling that inner ENFJ though in this because of his experiences, and he's able to come off that way, but you can still tell that he's a little bit still like detached. I think a lot of people could see that more as like his introversion, when in actuality, to me, I just see that as him having like a thinking function. So even though it's TIFE, like right there as a polarity. So his TI has him like removed, but then we're seeing him interact with his family most importantly. And so his FE is like reaching out a lot to like connect, while the TI is still kind of like removed in a certain way. One of the biggest reasons why I believe that he's an ESTP is that he does not like to wallow. There are people who, by the way, believe that, he's ISFP, which I can see why that would be the case, but in my opinion, since he does not like to wallow, then I don't think that's like indication. I think that's more of an indication that he's not an FI user, especially an FI dominant. And this is one of the scenes where I see that. Him and Kevin, they were at the mall, and Miguel shows up and everything, and Miguel says something about, I think his ex-wife just got proposed to, or like married or something like that, and Jack immediately starts trying to like encourage Miguel. And then Kevin, who I believe is ESFP, and we'll get there, he just says, classic. You always do that. You always go into a little pep talk, and I think sometimes you just have to allow things to suck. Sometimes a guy just likes to be bummed about crappy things. And literally after that, Jack is like, as if to prove a point, he's like, oh, okay, well, I can wallow, sure, yeah, he says something like that, but after some time passes, when him and Miguel are both wallowing, then Jack is just like, ugh. Then he sees Randall coming, and he's like, Randall! Hey, finally a breath of fresh air. Or not. Because Randall sits down, and he looks like, he's like, is right after the catch-22 sulking from Miguel, Kevin, and then even Randall. So then they all have like that TIFE axis, in my opinion. So it looks like he's the only FE user there, Jack is, and only TI user there, and he's just like, oh, everyone here just wants to like wallow, while I'm just like, hey, we don't have to sit in this. Like, let's just move forward with life, with our feelings. Some people may think like, oh well, how could a thinker be that warm, or how could a thinker be that, empathetic, that kind? I think that especially when it comes to their family, they can definitely be that way, such as Jamila's older brother, who's ISTP, that I interviewed on here. He can be that way. And Jamila often talks about like how she didn't even ever see him as like detached, removed, and all of that, but he was actually the one who she went to when, like, or he would come to her whenever she was crying in her room and stuff like that, and he would like ask like, oh, do you need somebody to talk to, stuff like that. And he's an ISTP, inferior FE, but yet he was able to pretty much aid to Jamila in the very same way. And the last few things that I wrote down were that typical, he's a mechanic. Whether it's by choice or not, he's really good at it. He has incredible evidence of FE, yet doesn't give what needs. And he's actually often hacked by what Kate wants. And he also finesses her to wear the shirt. So there's that scene at the pool where he pretty much did this whole ESTP kind of like finesse. If you go back and watch that scene where when Kate was younger, and she didn't want to wear like a certain shirt or something like that, the way that he talked to her and the things that he said to her, it seemed like an ESTP kind of like maneuver and finesse, a kind of like charm in a way. And oftentimes he allows himself, his FE, his tertiary FE, to be hacked by Kate's, because FE is often about giving what people need, and like meeting people's needs, not always meeting just people's desires. But whatever Kate desires, whether it's food, or whether it's food, stuff like that, whether it's even going in to save the dog, and everything, he does that because he's trying to always please Kate. He's always trying to make her happy. And even if it doesn't seem to make logical sense at times, his FE just kind of gets like hijacked in that way. You could also see his ESTP-ness when he's teaching Randall and Kevin how to drive, and he kind of like, after Randall almost like got them run over and everything, then he immediately is like, are you guys okay? Like he's checking in on them and everything, and then after he sees that they're all good, then he pretty much kicks them out of the car. He says things in a very simple manner. He's like a very simple kind of guy. He doesn't have any like type of like colorful speech or like very abstract. He's just very simple. The other day I came in and he was nibbling on, she was nibbling on his ear. That was the only way I could describe it. Pretty much Jack, when he was talking about how Kevin has a girlfriend now or something like that. And when you watch the actor, I am not going to try and attempt to say his name right now, but I believe that the actor is actually an ISFP in real life. And one of the things that he said during an interview was, Jack loves his wife and he loves his kids. He's very simple. Those two things are his life. Those two things keep him together. Jack also focuses on articulating how he feels rather than artistically expressing it like an FI user would. He's just all about articulation. Like, he just wants to say, what it is, but he's not really like looking for like a self-expressive means on how to demonstrate it, like how typical FI users, especially FI dominants, often do. He never cries. I've gotten really good at just swallowing the bad stuff, is something that he said. So this is at least, my ISFP wife, Jamila, she says, yeah, there's just no way that he's an FI dominant, and he doesn't seem to travel through his own emotional experiences. Now, speaking of FI dominant, who I do believe is ISFP in the show is William. He was known as Mr. Smooth. He was very meek, but he wasn't weak. He was poetic and he was very artistic. He had a very swaggy style, and there was even a scene where, like, he was looking in the mirror and everything, and he looks at himself and he's just like, I'm cool, you know, and it seems like very SP, you know. He expresses himself through music and poetry. William, just all around, he seems like a very healthy ISFP, especially like when you look at his younger years and everything. He's just very driven to meet his ideals and live according to the authenticity that he has. And even the fact that he had such a hard time like growing up, it could ascribe to inferior TE. But then, and eventually he grew more and more into that. But from being able to understand himself on a much deeper level, then he was also able to try and relate to like other people. Beth. I believe that Beth is an absolute ISTJ. She's very reserved. She has a no-nonsense demeanor. She keeps Randall in check. And they have the same functions, in my opinion, allegedly. And she says that she can't deal with his wallowing too much. There was a scene where I think they were on a date or something, or maybe like I believe it was the wedding, Toby's wedding and everything, and then she just couldn't like deal with him at that moment right there, like something about Deja, where she was just like, I can't do this right now, because she knows that Randall's always going through like a very strong FI kind of like, I'm giving away what type he is early, but yeah, very strong FI kind of like motion. Like he has to suck on that jawbreaker. For those of you who have watched my INFP versus INFJ video, he always has to like suck on that jawbreaker and like really trying to understand his emotions and all of that and process it. While with Beth, as an ISTJ, she has FI tertiary, TE auxiliary, so she doesn't really have time to be sitting down and wallowing through her feelings either, but it's for a different reason than Jack. She has things to do. She has to move on so that she can, like, you know, make moves and make decisions, and you won't be able to effectively be effective if you are spending too much time wallowing in your feelings, at least according to her philosophy. I believe that some think that she's INTJ, but I personally see no sign of NI. In fact, she always rolls her eyes whenever symbolism is presented, or is like, Randall, what the hell are you talking about, babe? And that sounds like a lot of ISTJs that I know, where they're just always like, wait, what? Like whenever intuitives start going off on their very abstract ideas and everything. I was actually even hanging out with an ISTJ just last week, and she was with her INFJ husband, and repeatedly the INFJ husband kept on bringing up like all of these like insights and intuitive whatevers, while the ISTJ would repeatedly like break in, like would interrupt him and be like, wait, what does the cast represent? Or like, wait, what does that mean? Can you explain that? Can you elaborate on that? And it was just so funny because I never knew how hard it was to like keep up with such high abstract conversation until I met her. And this isn't to say that every ISTJ is like that, but in another ISTJ that I hung out with, she even said like, you know, it just bothers her when people can't just like say things straightforward and like simply. And I believe that that's how Beth likes it. So this ISTJ, she said that it's not like metaphors and stuff are like that hard to keep up with. It's just like, why not just say it simply? Why not just say it straightforward? But Randall has a very hard time doing that. So then Beth gets frustrated. She's extremely practical, and she's had little to no problem trying to kick out William. She just saw it as like, look, I mean, I do feel kind of bad, and I know that this is like, you know, his dad. However, you gotta go. Like, she was just seeing it as a very TE way of like going about doing things. And the reason why I also think that she's an introvert is I think that she keeps this TE in her family. She doesn't really like seem to go out and like use it on like other people, while like what an ESTJ would seem to do. She seems to like only use it to manage her own family. But there was a time where she did go out and try and use it on people. However, it was still even in the background. She was working with Randall, who was a very idealistic type, and she was like, wait, Like, it's our first day to turn this building around without going broke. In response to today, we changed some tenants' lives. As you can see, there's just a difference between the two characters, and the screenwriters chose to do this. They chose to make Randall a very abstract and idealistic type, while making Beth more of the very practical, down to earth. And there's even a time where she says, "Can you come down from outer space and be in the real world with me? Thank you." And she just needs Randall to be more grounded, and that's where most of their conflict comes from. Even though they share the same functions, hint hint, there's this kind of like, oh, we really understand each other, but then we keep on missing each other kind of thing, because the same things that like I value so much, even though you value it, you don't value it as much as I value it. So we have to keep on talking about what we value and what type of compromises we need to make. So, speaking of Randall, if you haven't guessed it yet, I believe that he is INFP. Now, I want to note, this was hard. I believe that he's definitely an Enneagram 1, and in fact, that's much more clear than even his MBTI type. And I think that's why his MBTI type can come out so weird. But once again, you have to watch his development. You know, there's 3 different Randalls in the show, and you have to see what they all have in common so that you don't get the actors mixed up with what the writer intended. And so that being said, Randall, INFP, he was very hard, definitely an Enneagram 1. He was introverted despite his adult days. So when you watch him growing up and everything, you see that he's very introverted. He seems to be more of an in his head type of person, which makes him also very intuitive. He's clearly intuitive. He loves to use metaphor and focus on the abstract. He's not nearly as practical as his wife, Beth, is. And at the same time, he's more focused on abstract things. He's looking at concepts and all of that, as opposed to like getting into like a whole bunch of sports and everything. He has heavy evidence of FI, and FI can definitely be helpful, guys. It's not just FE, so a lot of people think that FE is evident with him because, oh, well, he thinks about people and stuff like that, but FI users do that too. It just comes from a different place, and you have to understand this place that he's coming from when he does this. For him, it's more of like, I don't want people to go through what I went through, and it's like he's seeing the experience. So because he's lived it and he's gone through that emotional process, then trying to understand himself better, he's able to now understand other people. He also has SI tertiary. So he's always returning back to like, you know, like kind of like what's familiar. And he gets stuck in that loop oftentimes, like, and he's always like daydreaming and reminiscing and like thinking back oftentimes too. He's all about having the business. This seems very TI inferior. Like even in the first episode, he's like, you know, and I have my own car, you know, and I own that, and I do this, and he's just talking about like, you know, all of that, and he's talking even to his daughter sometimes, and he's like, you know, you're gonna have your own business, or the money this and the money that, and it just seems like a very TE inferior kind of drive. Even the job that he had originally in the show, he was working there, but you can tell like his passion, it didn't seem like it was really there. It just seemed more like, oh, I was just trying to like, you know, try this out, and I was trying to like do this, and I was trying to find happiness over here, but eventually he finds out like, you know what, actually, this just isn't really me. I can be doing something different. So once he gets stuck in his FI and SI loop, oftentimes, he tries to branch out by using NE. He tries to engage himself in different types of things that mean more to him. He's puts himself in situations where he can learn more about himself and expand more of who he is. So he tries to get involved in humanitarian things. And he just seems overall very NF. So Kevin, talking to Randall, once said, "You got one of those things inside that you just do whatever if it makes sense to us or not." And I think that's an extremely FI kind of thing, where it's like, hey, you know what? This is the desire that I have, and I'm going to do that, even if it doesn't make sense. I'll just, carry this out with the TE kind of force. He's extremely awkward. He doesn't have FE. The way that he interacts and everything is just like very awkward. He seems to be extremely passionate, but he doesn't seem to have like good social skills. Well, I wouldn't say not good social skills, but they're not like up to par with how an FE user would. He seems more to have like an FI kind of like, woo, like either he's really depressed or he's very bubbly and happy. But yeah, he's awkward, and he doesn't seem to have like an FE bone. He doesn't know or understand social dynamics at all. He does and says what feels good and authentic to him, which is often awkward, corny, or even abrasive, especially with Deja. He has baby TE, looped with NE, that wants to fix external structures, but he isn't good at it. He jumps too quickly out of momentary passion and excitement, but then doesn't know how to maintain the detailed structure and order. And this is where Beth comes in handy. So he has all the passion there, and he just jumps to try and fix it, and he wants to impose on the external world in that sense. But that's just not his strong suit. He has the passion, but he doesn't really know how to do it. And then Beth, oftentimes she knows how to do something, but then she doesn't really have the passion. So they make a pretty good pair. His wife, in comparison, thrives in TE, an extroverted judging function, and he has no leading extroverted judging function. He does not adequately control external environments. Jamila wrote that one, but yeah, keep that one. He can't detach from his own feelings. This is vital. FE users naturally detach from their own feelings and latch on to others. He has to feel everything thoroughly. His emotional state is solely dependent upon himself. So his morale, the morale of the people around him, is not that FI users don't care. It's just that it doesn't influence them as much as with FE users it would. So for him, as long as he's actually feeling sad internally, then that won't change based off of the morale around him. He's just really sucked into his own perspective. He's really sucked into his own emotional experience, and he has to be able to travel through that and get out of that on his own. While with FE users, they usually aren't stuck in that, but they're more stuck onto like the people around them. And if that environment changes, then so does their mood. Everyone believes that he's a dork, including himself. He comes off nerdy, awkward, and dorky. He has an NE game with Beth before talking to Deja. And the NE game is pretty much like he did this with Kevin, where he's like, okay, let's think of all of the worst things that could possibly happen. That's very NE. Why would you sit there and try and think about all of these different things? And that's also very FI too, which is why him and Beth do that so often. It seems like, okay, let's think of all of the things that could possibly go wrong, very NE exercise, and then let's allow us to be able to emotionally go through that, or like see how emotionally we fit to these situations. That just screams FI and NE to me. And he cries over fathers, daughters, boys selling lemonade on the corner. That was Beth's own words. He's just very emotional guy. When you look at Sterling in real life, I watched an interview and a few other things of him, and what people actually said about him. I believe that he's actually an ENFJ in real life. So an ENFJ trying to play an INFP, I think that's why FE just seems to show with him here and there, especially in the latest season. You think of it as FE when in reality, if we're going through the type, growing up and everything, it's his NE trying to like seek out and, do this and like place himself in humanitarian things. I think that's what the screenwriter actually meant to happen. But it looks like FE because of the actor and because of our misnotions of FE in general. So now, speaking of Kevin, if you haven't guessed, I think that he was actually one of the easiest ones to type. And I believe that his type is ESFP. He's honestly self-centered, and he skips FI often so that he can be productive and efficient. If you refer back to the Sylvester Stallone episode, he wanted a very quick healing. And that was part of his, skipping through his like FI. Like he's just like, oh, I don't have time to like, sit here and do this and all of that. I have to like go through this. I have to like jump into action. Even though he wallows and stuff every now and then, just like I was speaking about before, it's something that, if it's not convenient for him, then he feels like, oh, this is going to take a lot of emotional energy. So unless if I'm actually going through that experience, I don't want to sit here and feel bad for myself. He's often stuck in his own narrative. If you weren't in the family, I would have been the star. You always want to show me up. That seems, it's no offense to the ESFPs out there, but very ESFP. He wanted to be the star of the family. He wants the whole show to pretty much like revolve around him. He wants to be like the important one. He has a lot of unresolved internal feelings that he discovers and embraces in therapy. It's not like he feels what other people feel or is a logical processor, so that rules out ESTP. He is an emotional processor, but ignores his emotions. That's why he's so unhealthy. He doesn't take enough time to go through his FI in the proper manner. He'll wallow every now and then, but FI development is not just about wallowing, if it is at all. It's about actually being able to understand your emotional process and then build your values from that and then continue to grow yourself as a person, expand who you are. And he doesn't take enough time to be able to do all of that. Randall says to himself, "You're not an addict. The only thing you're addicted to is attention." Whoa. This is during that therapy session where Randall just all of a sudden goes off on Kevin. But he's becoming healthy because he's learning and accepting more of who he is, which is #FI. As his FI grows, his NI grows. He starts to see things from other people's perspective more and becomes just an overall warmer person. And then one other thing just to throw in there, because, it's a stereotype, but it's just also true. He has a lot of swag/sex appeal, and he just drinks and has sex and takes painkillers to run away from his inner self. Another addition from, Jamila. But it's true, it's just continuing to go into that whole like SETE, like, I don't really want to sit with my FI. Like, I'll wallow when I feel like it's convenient for me to be able to get what I want by like, kind of like wallowing and guilting other people. But he doesn't want to like actually like go through the process and develop his FI in that way. Almost done. And now we are on to the last twin, but actually before that, I wanted to state the most controversial one that I probably have here, which is the last twin's husband, Toby, who I believe is ENTP, or was intended to be ENTP. The reason why I said that I believe that he was intended to be ENTP, it was because in my past video, I spoke about how whenever I'm doing these these profilings for characters, especially fictional ones, then I try to consider 3 different aspects. What the original writer intended the character to be like, the influence that the actor has on the character, and then the character's type in general. Also try to look out for, the character growing up, how they were. So that being said, looking at Toby, who most people believe that Toby is an ESTP, which is understandable. I'm not saying it's absurd or anything. It's just in my opinion, I believe that he was intended to be an ENTP. And although it's controversial, here's my reasoning. He just seems to have a very clear tertiary FE. He seems to be like, charming and all of that here and there, and he knows how to like, finesse and everything. But at the same time, he seems like it's not like something that's dominant for him. It doesn't seem like, he's using it as a dominant function to like keep everyone together and to meet everyone's needs, but he uses it more as like a little like trick to get him the things that, you know, he wants, or like to fix things here and there with harmony. He's optimistic in a very NE way, and he's extremely quirky. So he's always like, you know, coming up with, you know, these different ideas and everything. And although, you know, some people would see that as like SE, like, and he just like leaps into action and everything, I believe that the writers intended for him to like be quirky in this way. And I think that that's why they have him with Kate, who, duality. I think that they're a duality couple. And that's what makes him, you know, kind of unique in this sense. He's here to help Kate to get out of her comfort zone. He makes a whole bunch of Star Wars references, which every NTP that I know pretty much does. They were all on the inside, you know, and he's giving this whole metaphor when he's talking to to Miguel and Beth, and he's talking about like all of this Star Wars stuff like that. And I think that's just like a very NE thing. He goofed off in the support group that him and Kate were in, and he does like a lot of like puns. He pretty much was goofing off in a way that he was like, I'm sorry. I was picturing the stapler, which was totally inappropriate. I'm sorry. He wants to have that fun and kind of like mess with people, but at the same time he also knows like, oh no, this isn't, you know, what I'm supposed to be living up to, or like this isn't socially appropriate, is the term that I'm looking for. Like this isn't like what I'm supposed to be representing myself as. So let me stop here. Although it was just so funny, and that's another example of tertiary FE. This was huge for me, as to why I also continued to believe that he was an NE user. And he says himself, I was a dorky kid since birth. I was 16, such a nerd, like a Dungeons and Dragons type of nerd. This was said on the episode where, you know, they talk about, you know, his childhood and everything, and I think that he was getting married in this episode. What SE dominant plays Dungeon Dragons? I know SE dominants who get tired of such games, like such as even like Mafia and, you know, things like that. Like they want to actually go out and do things, but this is like completely like an idea type of game, like Dungeons and Dragons. It's all about your memory, staying in a basement and being with dorky kids for so long, and, you know, really trying to like just toy with your mind. I also think that, you know, SE doms, and this stereotype as well, but I don't think that they're often known as dorky. I think that they're actually often known as like, you know, class clown, cool, all of that. And even though I just spoke about Toby being like class clown and everything, I feel like he was class clown in a way that was kind of like maybe a little bit different. Seemed very wacky in the same way that Bill Nye the Science Guy does. He was just very bouncy with ideas and things as well. And another thing that I kind of wanted to go into was that Antonia and Joel, ENTP and ENFP, for Personality Hacker, they often talk about, you know, like even though you may be using a function as a dominant function, you're not necessarily using it to its strength, like to its highest strength all the time. So a lot of like NE users, like they said they enjoy kind of like just toying with ideas and everything, and like they get most of their stuff from just like reading. But this doesn't really actually like reach its full threshold of NE until they actually get out there and do something, so they can actually acquire the knowledge, so they can actually experience whatever it is that they're trying to experience. That being said, even though he may seemingly like jump into action a lot, from what I at least understand, NE users, when they're using NE on a very high scale, are often, you know, not necessarily jumping into action, but they try to actually actualize. They try to go out there and explore certain things. They try to actually go out there and, like, you know, do things and mess with the world in order to create and understand new patterns. So he doesn't wallow in self-pity or feelings like an FI user usually would. He genuinely doesn't need to. He's able to filter it through his TI. He doesn't suppress emotions. He doesn't allow others to wallow in self-pity either. He's just always trying to, like, present optimism to other people, like, other ideas, and just overall, like, a way of, like, improving them. And I think that this is, like, a very NEFE kind of thing. And lastly, to be totally honest, he just has a low swag. Like I said, he was dorky, and I think that usually SE users, they're often more like cool, chill, laid back. Like, so you see with an ESFP, they're usually like kind of like goofy in that way that we see with Toby and everything. But when it comes to ESTPs, often then they're not really as goofy in that sense, but they're more of like the really chill, laid back, kind of like the like even like scoff type of person. And I believe that one of the examples of an ESTP or an STP in general was I forgot his name, to be honest, but he was the guy who was at the retreat that was trying to get with Kate. And it seemed like him and Toby had this like rivalry thing going on. He was known to be pretty much an a-hole, and he just said things to people like how it is. He was very just straightforward in that sense, and he didn't like try and like color his words at all. He just kind of like was like chill and be like, hey, it is what it is. While with Toby, he seems to like want to see like an experience in life. He has like he presents himself in the world with a type of like optimism that seems like it's not limited to what's around him. And last, but definitely not least, Kate. I believe that Kate is an ISFJ. I believe that she has tertiary TI, which is super heavy, and she skips FE often. All of the three triplets, I should say, are looping. Kevin is having an SETE loop, Kate is having an SITI loop, and then Randall is having an FI-SI loop. And so Kevin has to get more into his FI, Kate has to get more into her FE, and then Randall has to get more into his NE, which we're actually kind of starting to see with Kevin going to therapy and everything and working on his whatever, and then Kate actually learning to now go out and trust people and confide in other people and talk to other people and open up more of her web of resource or community. And then Randall actually throwing himself off into like humanitarian humanitarian deeds, so that he can further find himself and what he's actually like really passionate about, and trying to like push that. Her experiences and impressions paint very heavily who she is. Something that Dario Nardi said. He said that SI dominants actually are the most different types when they when you look at them through brain scanning and everything, because they kind of are a representation of what they've lived through. So even though a lot of us may see like SI as like very basic and simple and everything, it's not as basic and simple as we think. For SI dominance, because that's literally like what they've lived through, they're literally the nurture versus nature kind of aspect for them. That's what's coming into play. Then for them, they become, their identity is exactly what their experiences have been oftentimes. Some people have thought of her to be ISFP, and to be honest, I've seen no sign of NI, and so I personally doubt that. And although I could see why some people would say ISFP, I think it's actually the tertiary TI that they're seeing, and then they're seeing the auxiliary FE come out in bad ways. And so then it's kind of looking like FI, when in actuality, it's TI with unhealthy FE. And her wedding was all totems for Jack. Totems is a word that I actually got from Antonia. For SI users, they often are the types to get like a tattoo or something to like of their for their dead grandmother, or like some type of thing that was like passed down, tradition. And so instead of like having like a symbolic element to it, it has like a literal, this is what this means to me type of aspect to it. And I believe that that's what Kate did for her wedding. She had a whole bunch of things that reminded her of Jack. Even the ice cream and the shirt, like going to go get a certain ice cream. It's like, oh, but it has to be this way. It's almost like the same thing with Rebecca, where she repeats a lot of the routines that she has and everything because they want to kind of relive that experience. All right, guys, and lastly, I'd like to just point out these last two people, Deja and Raven. And I'm not really going to go deep into their types because, to be honest, I didn't write down bullet points. I just felt like they just pretty much stood out. But Deja is an ISTJ, and if you watch it, then I feel like you'd be able to figure it out. And then Raven is an ESTP. And if you watch that, sure you'll be able to figure it out as well. Leave your questions, comments, concerns, and let's discuss this. Once again, remember that I'm not saying that my opinion is 100% factual. I just wanted to at least present my reasoning, and I wanted to see how you guys, like, thought about it. Maybe this was helpful to you to refine what you think and help you be like, oh, you know what? Maybe they are these types. Or maybe you need a little bit more convincing, so you want to present your arguments to me. Or not arguments, sorry. Reasoning. That's what I prefer. And let's just overall discuss. Let's just discuss this so that we can better learn. I will be coming back again soon with another video, most likely going to be on Jane the Virgin. And the last season is coming out pretty soon as well. But stay tuned, and let's see how this season goes. Done.